Welcome to the Resilience Report, where we go beyond the headlines to spotlight the trailblazers redefining sustainable business. I'm your host, Lauren Scott. In each episode, I sit down with ecopreneurs and lighthouse leaders, visionaries, who are tackling our planet's toughest challenges and proving that business can be a force for good. Thanks for joining me as we explore what's possible and what's next on the path to a more resilient future. What happens when a community is devastated, the local economy collapses overnight, and the future feels impossible to imagine? Our guest didn't just rebuild his own life. He helped rebuild an entire coastline. When Hurricane Katrina leveled his town, Ron Ladner made a decision most people would have run from. He opened a restaurant, not for profit, not for prestige, but to restore hope. The restaurant became Shaggy's, now one of the most beloved waterfront brands on the Gulf Coast. And what Ron built wasn't just a business. It was a blueprint for resilience, for sustainable leadership, and for putting people before profit, all while achieving long-term success in one of the toughest industries. If you care about building organizations that last, uplifting communities, strengthening teams, and designing business models that thrive even in uncertain times, this conversation will challenge the way you think and inspire you to lead differently. Welcome back to another episode of the Resilience Report. As it says right in the name of this show, so much of our focus over the past 2.5 years has been on different stories of resilience, specifically from businesses and leaders who are trying to find better ways to approach business. And sometimes resilience is a choice, and sometimes it's a necessity. And sometimes in that latter situation, some of the best leaders and businesses come forward from some of these more challenging times. And our next guest is the perfect example of that. So with that, welcome to the show, Ron.
How you doing?
Well, you have such a unique story, and I would love to start off at the very top with giving our listeners a little bit of a background as to how your story started with Shaggy's. 20 years ago, the world kind of came to a standstill when we saw Hurricane Katrina on the news. At the time, I was in Montreal. And I think for me, starting a business seemed like the last thing I would have thought of during that time. And yet that was such an important part of your story. So could you share a little bit about that with our listeners?
Well, at that point in my life, the last thing I needed or wanted was to start a restaurant. But, we were literally went through the eye of Katrina, and our entire town was flattened. I mean, there was nothing left. In the houses, the few that were left, were pretty much more than 80% destroyed. So it was just this crazy rebuilding effort. And we decided to stay and do whatever we could to lend our talents and our resources that we were blessed to have and be part of the team to build back. And just kind of along the way, you could see how people were just drained emotionally and mentally. And, folks had lost hope, and they just couldn't see the other side. Most people couldn't see the other side. And one of the things that I started to notice is that all of the gathering spots were decimated, right? There were no restaurants, there were no parks, there were no clubs. I say clubs like, reading clubs and a place for people to come together and connect emotionally. And it started to show its wear and tear on our entire community. And so we just came up with this crazy idea. It's like, let's open a waterfront restaurant. And this sole intention was to bring hope back to the town and give people their spirits back, give them their spirits back. Make them feel loved, make them feel great about themselves. And so we did that. And we never really built the business model around a profit core. It was just, this is what we're going to do to help bring us all back. Our sanity. Let's bring our sanity back. And so it worked very, very well. It was very, very successful. In fact, the restaurant was, we did 5 times the amount of revenue that I projected.
Wow.
And we just, fast forward 20 years, we've kept that same mission, and it's to let's have a restaurant that brings sanity to people in a messy world, right? And so we kind of focus on that. We focus on our guests. Yeah, anyone in our restaurant can tell you that the mission is when someone walks through that door, all right, by the time they leave, they need to feel happier and better about themselves than when they came in. And so it's just an example of putting your focus on something that really matters versus just making a profit, how wonderfully successful you can become. And our brand is such a strong brand because of the credibility we have with our employees and with our guests.
I'd love to dig into that a little bit deeper because I'm sure, to your point, setting up a business and opening a restaurant was probably not on your bingo card at that point. And so you would have been faced with all these different elements. And I know you've spoken to this in the past of just really challenges and adversity in that moment. But again, fast forward 20 years later, did you bring any of those lessons that you've learned during that time into the way you still continue to manage the business today?
Yeah, the big lesson is that we focus on the right thing. And that's probably the most consistent message we have for our people is that don't waste time worrying about things that do not matter. And for us, that's a list of things. You can take a look at our competitors and their or people in just other businesses. They tend to get so focused on things that don't matter. They lose focus on truly what does matter. And I think that what we learned is that if you focus on making a profit, making money, then you're going to lose focus on how you make money and how you make a profit. And we just kind of flipped the script and said, let's focus on what we need to do, right? And that is let's make sure that we take care of our employees, all right? And that was kind of the first. If you look at our culture, the core of it is our employees. And I know a lot of businesses and companies claim to take care of their employees, but we have proof of that. All right. Um, I come from a professional services background. That's how we run the company, and we take care of our guests and our employees. And if I want a guest to visit us and walk away happier than when they came through that door, there's only one way to do that is have an employee who's also happy, right? Because if he's disgruntled, we can never reach our goal. So we have to make them happy. And I'm pretty proud that, in the restaurant industry, the average tenure for a restaurant employee is 75 days. For us, our full-time staff, the average tenure is 3 years. So we put together something pretty special to keep them engaged and happy. If you can crack that, if you can get your employees, then some of the other stuff just kind of takes care of itself. And that's allowed us. So that's all we focus on. And if we can get that, then the profits and the monetary rewards are going to come.
To that end, certainly the model that you have in place is really different. I would say, especially for the restaurant industry, it tends to be one where I think a lot of us think of the smallest margins, so the lowest salaries. And I think it's more well-rounded than just compensation. And we can definitely speak to that in a moment. But I think just purely from a compensation standpoint, if we have listeners who are tuning in and maybe they are in the restaurant industry and they're trying to think of how do I have a sustainable company and then still offer reasonable and I think fair wages to staff, how have you navigated that to make sure that it remains a sustainable company as well financially?
We re-engineered how we service our guests. We got to that point of our success by getting our people to understand first and then buy into change. And it's like brainwashing everyone, right? If you look at the restaurant industry and perhaps in any industry, the people are conditioned to believe that the way it's always been done is the only way. right? And we took a look at this, from adopting and implementing, leading edge technology and different approaches to how many steps we need to take, literal steps, right? And how much time are we wasting? And we ended up, we had our window after COVID. I've been wanting to do this for years, but just the timing was never right. But we did a major overhaul and turned our service model into a team service model. And we had an uproar, right? We had half of our staff quit, and we turned it from an individual, fragmented service model to a unified team model. And it didn't take long for them to figure out that we were doing a lot more with a lot less people, and they all were making more money, right? We were making our guests happier because now we were paying more attention to them. And it just kind of evolved. And today, um, in my book, we just released a book, and in the book, one of the things that I point out is that, and I'm just going from memory here, but when we opened 17 years ago, a cheeseburger was $10. Today it's $14. So the cheeseburger's gone up 40%, but beef has gone up 250%. Well, the only way for us to overcompensate that, we got to do two things: become much, much more efficient, and or raise your prices. If you can't become more efficient, then we need a $25 cheeseburger. And so we've spent a lot of time on the back end of the service and delivery, and how we can increase things and make things more efficient. And the biggest move we made was the team service model. And it's tough for most in the restaurant industry to accept that, but we've built a culture of it's not a gypsy culture where you just pop in and work enough to buy a beer that night. And then when you get tired, you move on. We're bringing people in who want a career, and we're providing insurance and a 401k, and we're doing the things to keep people engaged. And if you can keep someone past 75 days, if you can keep them for a year, now instead of needing 10 people to do a job, you only need 6, because they become so proficient and so loyal and engaged and proud that you just become across the board more efficient.
And you mentioned that this had been brewing in your mind prior to the pandemic, but it allowed you that opportunity to really rethink it. How did you come to that conclusion? Was it through trial and error over the years? Do you have outside support? If I'm sure you're really just shaking up the model of the industry, what were those input factors like for you as you rethought what you wanted this to look like?
Well, I cut my teeth in my career in the software world, and software companies are about building employee culture and efficiencies, right? And so when we first started Shag, by accident, when I realized that it was a successful concept, I got involved and became, the head of the company. And people criticized me and said, "You've never run a restaurant company before. What makes you think you can do this?" And I said, "I don't need to know how to run a restaurant. What I need to do is understand how to build an organization that's efficient, and to understand our business model and do whatever I can to make us more efficient and better at what we do." And that's what we did. And right out of the gate, I think it helps that I'm a professional restaurant consumer, but I'm a very, very impatient restaurant consumer. All right. So it always bothers me that you come into the restaurant, someone would seat you, and you wait for your server. Well, your server's over there hanging out with the other servers talking about what they're going to wear tomorrow night on their date. Right. And so I just never understood how we wasted so much time. All right. And I wanted to do it, and we had talked about it before the pandemic, and people was, "No, this is not going to work. This is this crazy idea." After the pandemic, it kind of shook everyone up, right? No one had a job. So that was probably my biggest motivator. All right, we're going to bring everyone back to work. And through the pandemic, we kept our entire management team. It's like 45 people are on the payroll. So that very small window of everyone being unemployed and maybe not having the confidence gave me the opportunity to sell them on a new way of doing things. This side of the pandemic is going to be very different than the other side. And we have to adjust right now if we're going to thrive and get better. And because of that move, it's proven, you can look at the competitors around us. We gained market share. And yeah, that was the boost that we needed to really propel our brand and our business and our revenue.
And in terms of that classic business model, I think a lot of times for restaurants, people think that in order to continue to grow, you just have to add restaurants, more and more restaurants, and that's the only way to grow. And yeah, I know your model, you've really thought through how can you grow. Yes, it can include adding locations, but then how can you grow with the same store model and kind of deepen that connection within your own community so that your business can continue to grow?
Yeah, I made a big deal about this in the book, and you will see most of, multi-unit restaurant owners and investors. It feels like sometimes they measure themselves on the number of new locations they have, right? We opened 2, we got 10 now, we had 5 last year, we got 10, 15. And we just kind of, again, flipped the script and said, we're in our biggest location in Biloxi, we go on a 4-hour wait. All right. So we have the demand right here. Why go an hour away and take the risk of opening a brand new restaurant? Well, we have to buy new land, new construction, a $3 or $4 million investment when we own our property right here in Biloxi. Right. So we set out to add more capacity to each one of our locations, complementary services that would allow us to attract and serve more people. And I'm going by memory again, but 2025 versus 2019, we're up 48% in revenue just in the current locations. Now, the current locations are probably all, together we have 50% more capacity in those locations. But we didn't have to buy new land. We didn't have to, invest in construction, and it's working out really well for us. And we're going even further. 4 of our locations, we have purchased a property next to us, and we have projects underway to expand us. We've seen it before. We'll have at one of our restaurants, we're successful. Someone will open up next door to us and do okay, right? And so we're thinking, let's just open up next door to us, all right? And that's what we're doing at each one of our locations. We're opening up next door, adding, a new restaurant, same menu, boardwalk in between, with other entertainment offerings. So we're taking that route right now until a unique opportunity comes up. We're going to grow with what we have.
Well, it seems like you have a more holistic set of KPIs or metrics than maybe just the top line. It sounds like the top line is also doing really well. But I'd be curious for some of our listeners, they are entrepreneurs. Actually, quite a few of our listeners are entrepreneurs. And I'd be curious to see how you look at success. Like, what are those benchmarks that you look at when you are trying to balance certainly the social side, but kind of the greater impact as well as the business success? Like, what are the measurable pieces that you're looking at with your team? And maybe that can inspire some of our listeners as well.
For us, measuring our success is how well we do when the market is not doing well. And for example, all of our locations except for one, we can look around us. We can talk to the food vendors, the beverage guys, and they'll tell us, it's like, man, everybody is down right now, but you guys are up. Shaggy's is the only account we have that's growing, right? And in one of our locations, there's a resort tax that we have to pay, like 3%. So because of that, all of the revenues are from every retail restaurant is published monthly, and we can track what everybody's doing. And we know for a fact that for this year, we are there's two of us that have increased our revenue. And one of them is just a very small breakfast shop that expanded, literally, they added space. And so to me, that is a metric that shows how well are we doing versus our peers, all right? And how well are we doing in a given market? Right now, the market's down, but our revenues and our profits are going up because we just feel we're taking more of the pie.
You mentioned your own background was on the software side, I love that you said, I don't need to have this restaurant background. I know how to run a business. Like, I know how to approach this. Could you share, if you look back, where do you think this came from to have such a balanced approach to success? Because I agree, software is all about iteration, it's innovation, but you also are balancing this with those two pieces. But then again, to taking care of your staff, to taking care of the community. Where do you think that originally came from for yourself?
I think I've just, my career, I've seen so many people fail. And I have learned more from dissecting why this company failed or why this person failed than dissecting why did these guys succeed. And that might not be the best advice to your listeners, but the thing that I learned is that yeah, entrepreneurs, they start a business and they're excited and they have the honeymoon phase, and I'm gonna order business cards. I'm gonna get a website. I'm gonna get an office and this and that. Say, whoa, 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 go sell something. Forget about all that stuff, right? Go out right now and sell. Close a deal. That's what you need to worry about. Close a deal. I think fundamentally, people get caught up in those. Even if they open a restaurant, they're so worried about rewards programs and they need this and we need better art. It's like, no, get a reason, get people in here, right? Build a place full of love and joy and that folks want to be here. And I think that focusing on the things that matter, and if you look in the mirror and you're truly honest with yourself and you say, in this business or in this part of my life, this phase of my life, what really matters? And it's coming to the conclusion is a very hard thing to do because you have to be very honest. And once you figure that out, if we focus on those things instead of the things that this is how it's always been done, this is how they told me to do it, or this is how it's supposed to be done. All right, I'm gonna start a business. I'm gonna get LLC. I'm gonna run out and get business cards. No, focus on what matters. None of that stuff matters, and that's what we've done. And at Shaggy's, we focus on what matters.
You mentioned a little earlier too that so you've written a book, which I'd love just to know what that process has looked like. But in writing the book, did looking back and kind of reflecting and preparing the story and the narrative that you want to tell, were you maybe even a little bit surprised and reflecting so deeply? Did you find like there was anything that made you pause and really realize that you've had significant growth in writing it and then being able to kind of dig in a little bit deeper?
Well, I just finished. Actually, I go back tomorrow to do touch-ups on my audiobook. I spent all last week in the studio, and it was a very emotional thing for me. And, as I write the book, I did write the book myself. I laid out the chapters, and then chapter one, I just like poured my heart out. Chapter one is called Katrina. And I just went through it in my mind, and I just told the story. And chapter two, and I had my syllabus kind of laid out. But going through the process, and part of the process in the book is that we have 15 chapters, and I had an independent reporter interview 15 employees, and their quotes, or the end of each chapter is a interview with each employee. And when we first did the interviews, did them in like 2 or 3 days at different locations. He uploaded the rough draft of the results, and I read through it and just literally cried. And it kind of hit me that maybe we have something more special than maybe I'm just don't realize how very nice, what a great thing we have here. And to me, we, we have, we're the highest ranked restaurants on Google in every one of our marketplace. And that's very nice. I'm humbled to have accomplished that. But to hear that kind of feedback from your employees, it'll make you cry. To me, this whole process has made me realize that when you like write it and then read it aloud, it brings everything a lot closer to you. And I know now that before I started writing the book, I believe we have something much more special than before I started writing the book.
Well, sometimes it's just so important to be able to, I think, step out of it. You're probably so deep in the day-to-day to be able to see that feedback is huge. Was it only in reading maybe and hearing some of those testimonials from your employees, or did you have another moment in time over the past 17 years or so where you really said, oh, okay, I'm having a positive impact? Like you could really feel it. Maybe it was in the early days of just setting it up where there needed to be that space of community. But I would love to know if you had any of those, maybe not an aha moment, but a real moment of just realizing how much of an impact you were having with your business.
I don't think so. I think, and I go into this in the book as well. I was raised without money, pretty poor, but my mother was a Catholic saint. She hasn't been canonized yet, but she had a big impact on my life. And, there are times when I was a child, I was so damn embarrassed because the Catholic Church would show up with a meal for us on Thanksgiving. And I'm not sure we really needed it, but they felt we needed it. And just kind of going through that, I was just brought up to, I was just conditioned to just help people. We're given, I forget the scripture, too much is given, much more is expected. And I just kind of way I've lived my life. I'm much more humble now than I was in my 20s, but I've just never taken a step back and said, oh, I helped this person, or it's just kind of a way of life. And never pat myself on the back, and none of us should. But I've never had a moment where I've just, felt, oh my God, I did something really great here. It's like, oh my God, I'm thankful that I can help this guy is more how we think about it.
Well, it sounds like your mother was certainly somebody who inspired you over the years to give. Were there other folks along the way that have helped shape the leader that you are today?
Yeah, I talk about this in the book. My dad, I played 3 sports, through high school, and you know that teamwork and my dad really was influential on me in sports and lighting that fire to be competitive, to win. Right, that's all I had. We weren't saving for college or worrying about what I was going to wear for trick or treating or Halloween. Right, I wasn't taking selfies and spending my time FaceTiming. Right, we had none of that. All I really had was sports, and driven by my dad, this incredible desire to compete and to win. Right, I think I hope I was, I was considered a good sportsman. I think I was, but I think that that whole process dealing with coaches, understanding teamwork, and it's probably the sports, respecting your teammates, understanding each and learning to work together, right? Taking I do this best, so let me do this. You do this best, so that's what you need to do. I'm not really good at this. So we need to find someone, and pulling those parts together on a basketball court or a football field is no different than pulling it together in a boardroom or within a company. And I just feel like I'm still competing, and I'm playing a sport.
Maybe it is an athlete, but I am kind of curious if it sounds like this was never necessarily the role or the job that you had in mind. If you weren't doing this, do you think it would have been, you would have continued down that path of software? Was it the sports angle? It's always just kind of curious to see where someone would have maybe ended up if they didn't end up in their current role.
Ooh, that trying to sort that out in my mind would probably drive me crazy mentally. Just trying to figure out what I would have done. What I wanted to do, my goal was to gradually getting into commercial real estate development, like small projects. That's probably really where I would be. But now I'm doing that now as well. I'm not involved with the day-to-day operation of the restaurants anymore. Um, and we have 5 locations, and we built every one of them from the ground. We bought the land and developed the property. And that's really what I love to build. I'm doing some like small personal residential projects right now. And when I'm not doing that, I'm blue marlin fishing in the Caribbean. So it's balancing out good.
It is pretty full circle. Like you were saying, there is a whole commercial real estate component to it. I'm sure as you're setting up shops, and just need to double click into that for a second. I'm sure there's also a community stakeholder engagement. We talked a little bit about your employees, but what does that look like from a community engagement? You were mentioning you are the highest rated restaurant in all of the areas. Maybe if you could share some of your techniques of how you've gotten closer to your communities in those 5 locations.
Well, when we initially went into the cities that we're in, before we even open up, we spend time trying to solicit organizations that we can work with to help the community. And, for example, fishing's very close to us, and it's in our blood. And so just doing some research, I found out that there are people on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, which is 32 miles of beach and some of the best saltwater fishing in the world. How many kids that live within a mile or 2 miles from the beach had never, ever caught a fish? And to us, it's one of the most exciting things in the world is to watch someone catch their first fish. And so we partnered with a University of Southern Mississippi, their summer camp program, and we provided the funding to create the Shaggy's Angler Camp. And we fund, 75 kids a year to come participate in that camp for a week, and they catch their first fish. And we provide the charter boats to pick the kids up and take them out fishing. And it's just, we did the same thing. We opened up our location on the lake in Jackson, Mississippi, 7 years ago. And we did something very similar. We came in before we even opened. It was, the Shaggy's Fishing Festival. And they don't have, saltwater fish, but they do have fish there. And we had a 3-day festival where kids of any age could catch a fish. They were taught how to, bait the hook. They went through, and part of it that's very important for us is helping them to appreciate, respect the habitat. And the restoration part, is because people take for granted, the habitat, the resources, the salt water and the water, and the preservation of this habitat and how important it is to us is part of. It's not just catching a fish. It's like, see how important this is. Let's do what we can to preserve it and keep it forever.
I can attest to how important that first fishing trip is. My nephew, who at the time was 10, went and had his first fishing trip last year, and we all heard about it, and we all heard how big of a deal it was for him, to your point, to do that first experience. So it's beautiful. Well, I know our listeners will want to learn more. I'm thinking probably those who can get to a restaurant, let's tell them how they can get there. And then for those who are maybe a little bit further away, such as myself, but who want to read the book, what would be the best way for them to get more information?
Yeah, I have a website. It's RonLadner.com. Well, you can go there and click on the book. But the name of the book is Shaggy's Cheeseburgers, and it's on Amazon. And it's the introduction explains the title of the book through the end of the book was the Shaggy story, a real world tragedy triumph story through hope and change and love. And I got to think, it's just something hit me. And the cheeseburgers are, we are a seafood waterfront restaurant. All of our restaurants are waterfront seafood. But at any time frame that you want to go run a report, the cheeseburger is always the number one seller. And my sport fishing boat in the Caribbean is named Cheeseburger. That's what I named the boat. And so I thought the Shaggy story is such a lame title for a book. It's like, I want to do something creative. I probably had just enough glasses of wine to come up with this crazy notion that, why not play off the cheeseburger, right? Because a cheeseburger, physically, a cheeseburger is meant to make you comfortable, right? In a messy world. It brings you happiness. It satisfies you. It brings you joy. And when you look at what a cheeseburger does and what you actually get from a cheeseburger is what we stand for and what we strive to deliver to our people metaphorically. So that cheeseburger is a metaphor for making people feel good and bringing love and joy. But at Amazon, the name of the book is Shaggy's Cheeseburgers by Ron Ladner. And you click there and get the book.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure in the book we'll hear anecdotes of this, but I would love to hear from you directly too, because we do like to end every episode of the Resilience Report with the same question, which is, what do you think it will take for businesses and leaders to be resilient going forward?
We tell our people this all the time, is that there's nothing we can do about yesterday. There's nothing we can do. The mistakes you make, if you learn from those mistakes, they become lessons. And the more lessons you accumulate in life, the more resilient and successful you can be. And if we can get people to just focus on now and look back on their mistakes and convert them into lessons, then going forward, you're going to be in a better position to survive and be great.
Thank you so much, Ron. I can see why your employees love working with you and why your communities are so engaged with your different institutions. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
I hope that you've enjoyed this week's edition of the Resilience Report. If you would like to hear and see more, be sure to check out @The Resilience Report on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until we connect again, remember, even on the darkest of days, we all have the opportunity to be a lighthouse for others as we collectively pursue better, more resilient business.